muffins. So I have been looking forward to doing this video for a while because it's got some dinners in it and everything, and it's not just baking, but it's all or mostly from scratch. So in a Ziploc bag, I've just got 2 tablespoons of avocado oil, and I'm about to zest and juice a lemon in it, but I'm just making a marinade for shawarma. And we made this, I know I said in the Aldi haul video that I did, that we've been making shawarma, and I made it with chicken, and tonight I'm making it with beef, and it's just a really thin cut of beef. I forgot what exactly it's called, but it was pretty affordable. There was like 4, I don't know, fillets or whatever you call them in there, and I sliced them up really thin and everything, and just filled this bag with seasonings. I have a recipe, and like always, all the recipes I use will be linked down below, and I don't show you how to make the flatbread for the shawarma in this video, but I will also leave that recipe linked. It's super easy. So and if you don't know or never had shawarma, it's similar to a gyro. So there's usually like beef or lamb, and then like lettuce, and then like a garlicky, like tzatziki kind of sauce. Okay, so now I'm adding garlic. Of course, fresh is best, but I was making a lot homemade on this day, so I decided to do jarred garlic. And then to that bag, you're gonna add 2 teaspoons of coriander, 2 teaspoons of sweet paprika. I just use regular paprika, and 2 teaspoons cumin, a teaspoon of turmeric, a half a teaspoon cinnamon, which I know sounds weird. So me and my husband don't really care for these flavors typically, but in this recipe it really works out. I think it's the lemon zest and everything just balances things out, and I have used lime juice before and it worked just fine. So but the first time I made it, I did leave out the cinnamon, and I couldn't tell the difference. So if you really don't like cinnamon, you could leave it out. And then a half a teaspoon ginger, and a 1/4 teaspoon cayenne pepper, and then a 1/4 teaspoon ground cardamom, and then salt and black pepper. So you just mix it all in the bag with the oil, and then you'll see me cut up the meat and everything, and then you leave it to marinate for like a few hours or overnight, even a couple days if you wanted to. And this would be really good on a grill, but we didn't grill it. I do have a cast iron grill pan that goes on the stovetop, and that's what I decided to cook the shawarma in. And it'll actually like get grill marks on it. It just won't have a smoky flavor. So that's an option if you want to do that. Okay, and so here I'm showing you all the spices and everything. And because of all the spices added to it, it is like a thicker marinade. So if you had a lot of meat to marinate, to marinate, not marinade, you'd probably want to double this or add more oil so that it goes further and stuff. The recipe does call for olive oil, but I always use avocado oil because it has a higher smoke point. And that means it's just not gonna like burn on you whenever you're trying to cook it and everything. Olive oil's got a pretty low smoke point, so I don't really use olive oil whenever I'm cooking stuff on a higher heat. So you see how thin this already comes. I'm just cutting it up into bite-sized pieces since we're going to be eating it in a wrap. And we want to try making shawarma with all sorts of different kinds of meat. So we haven't done lamb yet. That's a little bit pricey for us and it's not our favorite. So like I said, we've done chicken, we've done this cut of beef, and I want to try it with like a pork loin, like almost like pulled pork, so that it would be really easy to eat in the flatbread. And you could do all sorts of toppings for this. We did shredded lettuce and fresh cucumber. You could do other veggies and stuff. I think there's a lot of possibilities with this dish, but and you'll see I always have a grocery bag hanging whenever I have to dispose of meat. That way it doesn't stink up the house before I can take the trash out. And I'm just like mushing all the seasoning and everything into the meat. And like every several hours you'll just want to like massage it in to make sure it gets over everything. Okay. And this is a different night. My husband wasn't home and I had a protein something. I don't even remember what I ate earlier that day. I don't know if it was like salami and cheese or what. But I still wasn't full. I still needed, I don't know, just something cooked, but I didn't really want to cook. So I've been making potato wedges on my pizza stone. And they actually get like pretty crispy. You'll see in a bit. I just cover them in like avocado oil and ranch seasoning. I think I did dill and salt and pepper this time, but they got nice and crispy. And I'm using my ketchup from Azure. It's really good, y'all. It's really tangy. I like a good bit of vinegar in my ketchup. So okay, and on this night we had pork chops I just bought, and I'm just dipping them in a mixture of egg that I beat with some milk and then homemade breadcrumbs. So with my like heels of bread or bread that's gone stale or whatever, not bad, just stale, I like to keep it in the freezer and until I build up enough that I want to make breadcrumbs with. So that's what I did. I just baked them in my oven and then until they got dry on a really low temperature, and then I pulsed them in my food processor. And I like to double coat the pork chops, so I dip them in the breadcrumbs first and then the egg mixture and then the breadcrumbs again. So that's what you're seeing me do, and I like to season them after, just so I don't waste a lot. There's always breadcrumbs and like milk and egg mixture that you don't end up using, and I don't want to waste all the seasoning in that. So I just season it in the pan, and I've got a cast iron skillet here with some butter heating up, and I'm just gonna let those sizzle away. I think I just did salt and pepper on these tonight. It's really simple. The breadcrumbs were slightly sweet, not gross sweet, but just a little bit sweet because they were from the milk bread I had been making. Oh, and I did add some parsley flakes. I just like to add it for color and watch it sizzle. I did finish these off in the oven for maybe about 10 to 15 minutes, and we just had some green beans and some potatoes, and I used some of the like garlicky sauce from the night we had shawarma to put over the potatoes, and it was so good. It's like a tangy like sour cream mayonnaise based sauce. Okay, so this is a new night. I've got some rice that I just put a cup of rice into a greased like 9x13, and then the recipe calls for a cup of chicken broth. I don't have any, and I stopped using bouillon because I can't find any with good ingredients. So I did water and like turmeric and poultry seasoning, I think, and like just added extra salt and pepper. And the recipe also calls for salsa. My husband doesn't like salsa, so I leave that out, and it still tastes plenty flavorful. You melt 2 tablespoons of butter, you throw that in, and you drain and rinse a can of black beans, so you'll see me do that. And then I cut up some boneless, skinless chicken breasts and lay that in there. So you're going to want to like stir the seasonings and rice together before you add your chicken in, and you just lay your chicken on top, and then you take a can of enchilada sauce and you pour that over your chicken. So we don't eat very spicy dishes around here. We like flavor but not a lot of spice. So the only can of enchilada sauce I had was medium and not mild. It was a bit spicy for us. And now looking back, I think I want to get into making my homemade enchilada sauce, because I looked up recipes after doing this and it seemed pretty simple. I think you just get like butter and flour on the stove, so that it gets a little bit thick, and then you add like, I don't know, tomato sauce and tomato paste or something like that, and then your seasonings. So I may do that, and that's really the only thing I saw that's like, that I could have made looking back now. So yeah, this video is about homemade cooking. Cooking from scratch, and for the most part it is, but that's something looking back now, I want to try to do that homemade. So, and I just did 2 large boneless, skinless chicken breasts, and I cut them up so that they're not super small, but just small enough so that they don't take forever to cook. And then you'll see me put this on there, and we're gonna add cheese later, so it doesn't look very appetizing right now, but it'll look delicious later. Okay, so now I have a block of cheese, and it's in a little vacuum sealed pouch thing. So I've been buying the huge blocks of cheese, like they're deli sized blocks from Walmart, and I've been cutting them up and freezing them, and they freeze really well. Okay, so it's done cooking. So you're gonna want to cook it for at 350 for 45 minutes, and you're gonna want to keep it covered so that it cooks through and doesn't dry out and everything. And then you're just gonna stir it around, and then add the cheese on top, and then put it back in the oven to melt the cheese. And once the cheese is done, it's done. Okay, so now we're getting on to making an Italian loaf of bread. And actually I'm making 2 loaves, so I'm doubling this recipe. But I've been making the Japanese milk bread for a while, and I wanted to make Uncrustables like at home because I have the press for it, for the kids at church that I teach. Well, the milk bread doesn't work well for that because it kind of flakes apart almost like a Pillsbury biscuit kind of thing. So like they would fall apart whenever I'd make Uncrustables with it. Then I tried this Italian loaf recipe, and it works great, y'all. It's so bendable, and like if you wanted to make half a sandwich and fold it over, it would do that and not crack or split or anything like that. It's very soft inside, and it's a very simple recipe. So it's just 2 3/4 cup of all-purpose flour, 2 teaspoons of instant or active dry yeast, it doesn't matter, and I use mine interchangeably. I think I have active dry, but I haven't had a problem mixing like the different yeast types. So 2 tablespoons of sugar, a cup of water, 1.5 teaspoons salt, 2 tablespoons of olive oil, which I use avocado in place of that. So because I doubled this recipe, I added the first full cup of water into it, and then I like slowly added the rest, because sometimes it's too much water. If you've ever been into bread making, it's kind of like that. Sometimes it's too much water or not enough, depending on like the humidity, or if it's raining, or the time of day where you live. It just changes. So that's just something to keep out for, but it should like pull away from the sides of the bowl when it's ready. It shouldn't be sticky, but it shouldn't be dry. It's okay if it's a little bit sticky though. I will say that, because you'll get a really moist loaf if you do that. Okay, and so it's just going to go in your stand mixer on low for like 5 minutes or something. And you can knead this by hand, and if you did, it would take like 8 minutes. It's not that big of a deal. And I love this recipe because you just throw everything into the bowl. So you see I greased the bowl and just made sure that my loaf was nice and taut so it'll rise well, and then I covered it for an hour to let it rise. Okay, so something really fun now is we're gonna get started on making chocolate chip muffins, and we didn't have anything in the house for like grab and go breakfasts or for dessert. So I thought these would be a great item to use for both. Okay, so this recipe called for you to melt butter and slightly cool it. I didn't do that because I thought by the time I whisk in the sugar, it won't be so hot to put the eggs in. So I did that, and I added a stick of butter, melted it, whatever, and then added a cup and plus 2 tablespoons of sugar. I think I just did a cup. I must have missed the 2 tablespoons, and now I'm looking at the recipe and I don't think I did that, but that's okay. So you just whisk that really good together, and then you add 2 tablespoons of oil, 2 eggs, a tablespoon of vanilla, 2/3 cup of buttermilk, which it says to have that room temperature, and then a 1/2 cup sour cream that's room temperature. I didn't worry about making it room temperature. My butter was already warm. I figured it would. Anyway, it's fine. The muffins worked out fine. But so I don't ever buy buttermilk even for my biscuits, and they turn out great. I take whole milk, sometimes even 2% if that's all I have, and add a splash of vinegar. It'll kind of separate the milk and make it curdle, and it'll take the place of buttermilk. So if you don't want to buy buttermilk, you don't have to. I promise this works. And I'm just showing you like how it's separated in the glass. But yeah, I swear that this works just fine. And my husband hates the taste and smell of vinegar, and it does not bother him. So there's your proof. Okay, so I added the sour cream. Normally I use Greek yogurt because I don't ever have sour cream on hand, but I did on this day, so I just decided to use that. And then you're going to add in the dry ingredients. So this recipe actually says to do it in 2 separate bowls and all of that mess. You can if you want to. I just typically don't. So unless I really want to make sure the recipe is perfect. So I just added 2 1/4 cups of all-purpose flour, 2 3/4 teaspoons of baking powder, a 1/2 teaspoon baking soda, and a 1/2 teaspoon salt. It also called for 1/8 teaspoon cinnamon. I didn't add that. I didn't think we would really care for that in a chocolate chip muffin, so I just decided to leave that out. And then I do mix the smaller, I mix the dry ingredients together on the top a little bit before I mix it into the rest of the muffins. And then I whisk it, and you're supposed to be careful not to over mix muffins, I guess, so they don't get tough. So I just whisked it until most of the lumps were gone. And then I added our chocolate chips to it. So I spilled flour everywhere. So I added several different bags of chocolate chips because we had some already open bags. One was dark chocolate chips, so I added that in first, and then just added extra semi-sweet. I do think it would be better with the mini chocolate chips. That's what the recipe calls for, just because you would have more chocolate in each bite. But I didn't have any mini chocolate chips, otherwise I would have totally added that. So you can see I'm adding our little leftover bags, and then I don't add the full bag of this one. I think it just calls for a cup of chocolate chips. And then after you scoop the muffins, you can sprinkle like turbinado sugar or the really coarse sugar on top of them. I decided not to do that. I didn't really want a hard muffin top, so we did not do that. And it's a pretty thick muffin batter. It's nice and pretty. Okay, so I've got these brown paper cups. I think my mom gave me these. She already had them in her pantry and she wasn't using them, so she didn't want them. They're just from Amazon, I think. But I switched to using brown paper ones because I was all into the colorful ones for a while. And one day I had like red and white polka dot ones. The background of them was red, and it turned my blueberry muffins orange because of the red dye in the paper. And since then, I like was so mad about it that it ruined my muffins. So I got rid of all those, and they're paper, so I could just recycle them. But now I only buy the natural brown paper ones. I learned my lesson. Okay, and then the recipe says to fill them up to the top, so that's what I tried to do here. And then you're supposed to preheat the oven for 425 and then let them bake for a little bit and then lower the temperature or whatever. That's typically so that the muffins will rise a lot initially but not have to stay in the high temperature oven, otherwise they'll get overcooked. So I didn't feel like getting up and down. Like, I needed a break. I didn't want to do that for each batch of muffins, so I just decided to bake them at 400 for like 20 minutes, and they turned out great. They were moist inside, and all that jazz. So if you want to do that, cool. If you want to follow the recipe, go ahead. It doesn't matter. It's your kitchen. Do what you want to do. So and I just had a couple more muffins to scoop out, and then I had to get to weighing my bread because it's been an hour. So I've been using grocery bags over top of my bread because while it rises, because it is one, they're free, like I already have them from buying groceries, and two, they dome at the top really nicely. So and they keep the moisture in really well. I learned that from Lisa on Farmhouse on Boone, like in her old sourdough bread videos. She used grocery bags over her sourdough bread. I don't know if she still does it, but that's where I learned it from, and I think it's a pretty cool thing. So because I doubled the loaf recipe, I got out my scale so I could split it in half and have an even amount of dough in each loaf pan. These loaf pans are different shapes. I think they're the same like volume, hold the same volume, but I'm just taking some parchment paper and like crinkling it up so that it won't like pop back out and it'll form to the pan better. And I'm using binder clips, so that's one of my biggest tips, is so that the parchment paper doesn't stick up and like keep your bread from rising or get in the way. Use binder clips, but take them out before you put your bread in the oven. I think they're metal, but I would not put them in the oven with your bread or at all for that matter. So here I am just splitting the dough up, and it doesn't have to be perfectly even. I just wanted it to be a little bit even. And one of these loaves, after I make it, it's going to go in the freezer, and the other one, you'll see we cut into it, and William enjoys having these loaves with dinner. So these are great for lunches, for sandwiches and stuff, and for dinner. And I'm just like pressing it out into a rectangle and then rolling it up, but also using my thumbs to kind of push under the roll as I like roll it towards me, if that makes sense, so that I'm pushing it so it has a seam and it doesn't have like extra bubbles in it from me rolling it, kind of. Like there's no space because I'm pushing the dough so it'll meet together. And I just try to blend the seams as much as I can so it won't pop open. And then I'm going to cover these again, and it's going to rise for about another hour, or until it's like at the top of the loaf pan or just at the top. And I don't always do this, but I like to, with this recipe, I like to push it into the corners because it's going to rise again anyway, and that way it gets the nice loaf shape, and it gets into the corners. So I tried to use just one bag to cover both pans. That wasn't working. So I had to go grab another grocery bag, but it's cool because it's just repurposing something I already have that's, you know, basically trash. So, and I only use these grocery bags if they haven't touched like meat, or if they're not from like a store, like a clothing store or whatever. I only do them if, like, I don't know, bananas have been in them or something, you know, something safe for my bread. Okay, so here I am trying the muffin, and they were very good. So I was pleasantly surprised. Sometimes I feel like I have to tweak recipes to get them to where we would really enjoy them, and I might do a couple tweaks, but nothing major. It was a really good recipe. So here I am taking my binder clips off and testing to see if it's ready, and it rose quite a bit. So the recipe for these actually says to put egg wash on them. I don't do that, and they turn out fine. I don't see any problem with it. So you probably could. I just, if it's not necessary, I'm probably not going to do it. So I was trying to get the parchment paper off of these, and they were hot. It bakes at 350 for like 40 minutes. This is my first time using this parchment paper. I got it from Amazon, and it's a little bit thinner, and it kind of sticks. Like if something's too moist, the parchment paper will get wet and it'll stick to it. So you'll see me, like, this hot loaf of bread, I'm trying to peel the stuck on parchment paper off, and part of it got like into the bread. I was able to peel it out though, thank goodness, but it did mess up my crust a little bit, so I was kind of bummed about that. I might have to spray it with like avocado oil spray next time. But here's the lovely loaves of bread. And this, see how squishy and nice that loaf is? Alright, y'all, that's everything. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today, and I can't wait to see y'all again soon. Bye!